All right, so in this video, I'm going to go over the storyboarding process, and we'll look at creating a storyboard and then posting that on the class blog for our weekly update. So the storyboard is really the very beginning of the process. Animation for a large studio involves a lot of different steps. We can actually take a look at the production process here. So there's a few flow charts that kind of talk about the process of an animation. This is kind of a basic summary. You can see more detail in each of these steps in here if you want to look at these a little bit more. But the basic idea, so we start with a script. Writers will write out all the dialogue and the scenes, scenarios, and stuff like that. And then after that, we go into this process where we create a storyboard, location and character design, and audio recording. And so with most animation, at least at like the sort of like high studio level, the storyboard and actually the recording are kind of the first thing that happens. So you storyboard out the animation to match the dialogue with different actions, and then actors are going to record the audio because people need to animate to those recordings. So you need to have the recording to animate the mouth moving and people reaction and stuff like that. So after that part of the process, you do an animatic. An animatic is basically like an animation, except it's only kind of the main drawings. The in-between drawings that fill out the actual motion are not used, and that's used to do editing and make sure everything looks good before you do the final version. Then you do a little bit of styling and sound, and then you go to the production workflow. In production, this is where, depending on the style of animation you're doing, you may do different things. So in traditional animation, there's going to be layout and posing. So some of the animators will just draw the main poses of the animation. And then a bunch of other animators, you might have like 10 or 20 or 100 different animators, depending on the size of the project. They'll actually draw each frame of the animation. And then that gets scanned in the computer, that gets painted, composited, and then rendered out. We'll do a little bit of that, but obviously we're not going to do all of that stuff. So then there's different styles. So in a digital animation, you kind of skip the scanning part because you're not scanning physical images. In cutout animation, you don't do ink and painting. You just go straight to compositing. So it's a little bit different depending on what style of animation you're doing. And then in post-production, this is when you do the editing of the final digital files, or film files if you're working with film. You edit the audio, you do any mastering or other things that you need to do. So there's a lot of different components to the process of production. But after writing a script, it really starts with the storyboard. There's a video here that I'll just show a little bit of, but I really recommend watching this, especially if you like Pixar animations. This shows their storyboarding process. And you can really see how important the storyboard is to the process if you look at this video.
Now, we're going to explain to exactly
storyboard
how
is very,
we
very elaborate.
just
So you
create
can see
story.
that behind them.
We usually
really
start with a
drawn,
written word, and I'll write
pretty,
something,
detailed
and then once I think
drawings
it's good
of all
enough,
the
I
different
ask for
components
see
of
if
the
John
scene.
likes it and approves it.
So I want to skip ahead because here we go. So the cool thing about this is it actually shows the storyboard compared to the final product over here. So you can see the final version of Toy Story at the bottom, and then you can see the moments in the storyboard. So they've worked out all these important moments in the storyboard, and then the animation fills in everything in between those. So that's kind of the goal for the storyboard, is to map everything out so we know how much animation we need to do. In a big animation project, you really have to kind of budget everything because animators, it takes a long time to do stuff. You can only pay for a certain amount of animators at a time. There's all sorts of constraints that you have to consider when you're planning out making your animation. For us, we're just making a 10-second animation, so we're just going to do a quick storyboard. So if you click here, you'll find a storyboard template. In an in-person version of this class, we would print these out and we'd actually write on these in class and then take a picture and upload them. Since we're not in person, you can do that if you want. If you happen to have a printer, you want to print this out and then take a photo and upload it, you can do it that way. But since we've already learned how to use Adobe Illustrator, that's a really easy program to use to do storyboard. So I'm gonna download a copy of this storyboard and then I'm gonna get set up. So I'm gonna go over to my Finder and I'm going to open my Finder window and go to my MMP 100 folder. I'm going to make a new project for my animation. I'm just going to call this animation. Animated Words and Emotions is a very long folder name, so I'm just going to call this animation. And then I'm going to make a new window, just Command N, and go to Downloads. I'm going to grab this storyboard and just drag it over here. And I'm going to open this up in Illustrator. So it's a PDF, but Illustrator will be able to recognize it. So I'm going to right-click on this and click Open with Adobe Illustrator. And we're just going to go over kind of the basics of how to fill this in. You probably won't need more than one storyboard for your animation. Just keep in mind, we're just doing a 10-second animation. You can make it about whatever you want, but the prompt, if you want to follow the prompt, is an animated word and emotion. So taking some emotion and using that as sort of the basis for the animation. So I'm going to close down here and make this a little bit smaller. And so you can see there's our storyboard. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lock this layer. So I'll just turn on the lock here. And what I'll do, if you wanted to do multiple pages, you could do multiple layers. So I'll do an example of that. So I'm going to first create a new layer. And for this one, I'll just do kind of the titles. So that way I can have separate layers if I want to. So I'm going to grab the type tool or the text tool and make a title here. So you can also, just draw if you have, if you want to draw with the brush, but I'm going to use the type tool for this part. So for the title of my animation, I'm going to choose an emotion. So let's find a random emotion to do. I'm going to use a random emotion generator. Let's see what we get. Madness. Okay, so I'm going to do a animation based on madness. So I'm going to call this my animation madness. And I'm going to make this text a little bit bigger. So I'm going to open up my properties panel and just increase the text size a little bit so it's a little bit more readable. And I could change the font as well, but I actually don't really mind this font. That's fine. So I'll just put this here. And so in here, we have like a couple lines where you could add the basic premise. You might not need to do that, but you could add some context here. So I'm just going to write this my animation for the emotion madness. Okay, so I have a little summary here of the main action. But most of what I want to do is actually kind of design the animation in these boxes here. So I'm gonna just call this my title layer. I'll call this my background layer, and I'll lock that. And so then I'll just make a new layer. I'll drag this up here and call this page 1. And so you don't really need to make multiple pages, but if you do, this is how I would do it. So for our emotion madness, so we have 6 boxes, and what we want to do is draw the main action in the box, and then any dialogue or directions or camera angles in the lines below the box. You might not have a lot of we're making a very simple animation, so you don't have to worry about like being super elaborate, but if you want to add stuff in there, you can. So you could use the brush and do some drawings, or you can just use some basic shapes. We're going to be animating with basic shapes in After Effects, so that makes sense. So if I want to use madness as my example, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start with a circle. I'm going to hold shift just to make my circle like that. And that looks pretty good. It doesn't have to be, anything too crazy. So I'm going to just draw this circle, and this will be kind of my starting point. So I'll draw some text and I'll say, start with a simple circle. I am just kind of making this up as I go along, if you can't tell. So for the demo purposes, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this. You probably want to spend a little bit more time just kind of thinking through a concept. Let's make this text a little smaller. So, in the visual, in the box, we just want to show what it's going to look like. But in the bottom lines, we can describe either the dialogue or audio cues, camera angles, all the different stuff that wouldn't be clear necessarily from the visuals. Okay, so I'm going to start with a simple circle. And then if I want to keep using the circle, remember I can hit Option. I want to get my selection tool. I can hold Option. Oh, sorry, I want to get my... Yeah, I have my selection tool. If I hold Option, I'll get the double arrow and I can make a copy of this. And so to draw madness, maybe I'll start just by kind of wiggling around a little bit. So I'll maybe do like a couple of things like this, and I'll say, I can also duplicate the text if I want to. So I'm gonna grab this text and pull it over here. Just holding Option lets me do that. And then if I want to edit the text, I hit T or select the type tool. And I'm gonna say circle wiggles around. Okay, so then next, I'm gonna grab this circle again, and then let's animate some stars flying around the circle. So I'm gonna grab the star tool, draw a little star, just kind of like put a few around, and then in my type, I'll get my selection tool again, and Option click to copy that type, and I'll put stars flying around the circle. And so you can see the first 3 frames. So I'll just kind of go from there, just kind of blocking out the parts of the animation that I want. You might have like a beginning and an end in mind. And so you could start with the first frame and the last frame. That might be a good way to kind of map out and then fill in the middle. But there's a lot of different ways that you could go about that. So for the demo purposes, I'm not going to continue because I'm just going to keep kind of adding to this. So hopefully that gives you the basic sense of how this is going to work. And so now I've got the beginning of my storyboard. And so what I'm going to do is just export an image of this. And if you had multiple pages, so let's imagine I had another page, you could turn this page off and on and just export with the different pages. But you probably don't need more than one page for the most part. So let's go ahead and export a JPEG of this image. So I'll change this to JPEG. We don't need an SVG or a PNG. I'm going to click Use Artboards. I don't want it to crop to the storyboard grid. And so I'm just going to say storyboard page 1 and click Export. And this seems fine. I'm just going to kind of ignore those settings, and just as long as it looks okay, I don't really care that much. It actually looks pretty bad. So let's try that again. There's a lot of weird sort of banding in there, and I think because I don't know why. Let's try that again. So I'm going to go to Export as JPEG, Use Artboards. I think because the color model is CMYK. I don't know why that happened. Let's change it to RGB, and then I'm going to turn the quality up to 8. And let's see if that looks a little bit better. Oh, but I forgot to name it. Okay, that looks a lot better. We definitely want it to be legible. It's not very large. It's a pretty small image, but it's definitely readable. So I'm not too worried about that. So I'm just going to hit Enter and rename this page 1. And so now we can make our update post. And that's all we have to do for this week. I am going to cover some After Effects basics so you can get started animating in the next video. But as far as our weekly update, just start with a storyboard. Just kind of think through what you want to make for your project so we can review those, and then you can make your animation. So if we want to make a post, I'm going to go back to the Open Lab, and I'm going to click plus here. And let's choose a category. So this is going to be our weekly blog post. And let's add a title. So let's call this my storyboard. You could call it storyboard update or just storyboard. And we'll just say, here's my storyboard draft for my animation. The emotion I'm animating is madness. And then we'll just add that image in there. So I'll click the plus, grab the image, and then go to upload. And I'll just go to my document, MMP 100, animation. There's that storyboard, and I'll just click open. Okay, so there we go. That's our first page of our storyboard. Of course, mine is not complete. This is just for demo purposes. You should spend a little bit more time thinking out through the whole story and adding, as much as you need to tell that story. Okay, so when we're done with that, we just click publish, and we can take a look at it, make sure it looks good. And there we go. So that's good for our weekly update. And so after this, we'll get into some animation. So that's it for this video. I'm going to do one more quick video where I talk about some of the basics of After Effects.